This video is based on structural unemployment. Structural unemployment is a mismatch between skills and work available. So it's often due to permanent shifts in how an economy works. For example, maybe changing industries or focus on different sectors. It's considered to be voluntary unemployment, and it is measured as part of the natural rate of unemployment. And that's really, really key to remember. So this diagram shows you how acceptances for jobs and the actual labour force, there's a difference. And as you can see, the equilibrium is not at the labour force output, and therefore the arrow highlights that voluntary unemployment, which structural unemployment is part of. Now, it's not just structural unemployment, there's other types of unemployment in there as well. So for example, frictional unemployment and possibly real wage unemployment as well. But this video is just going to consider structural unemployment. And the idea, I suppose, is try to reduce structural unemployment by decreasing that difference between the AJ and the LF curves. So, structural unemployment in the UK. The OBR reported in 2020 that it had been rising, and the pandemic was a reason, with structural changes to the way consumers are buying goods, for example, such as e-commerce. And in the graph, the blue highlights the impact that structural unemployment can actually have on real GDP. However, it's key to remember that, of course, there is a difference between voluntary and involuntary unemployment. And as we can see in this graph, that difference is really shown in 2021 quarter one. So as we can see there, the total unemployment spiked, but a lot of that was due to the recession, and it was demand-deficient unemployment, which is not part of voluntary unemployment, and it's considered to be involuntary. So structural unemployment would be part of the voluntary unemployment, and as we can see, actually structural unemployment is forecasted to actually start to fall. And actually, in 2021, the OBR revised their forecasts, and they did change it to highlight this. So one of the reasons being is because of record vacancies helping to obviously fill all those gaps in the labour market. So anyway, what are the examples of structural unemployment?
There was a spike of automation anxiety in the late 20s, early 1930s, when machines were starting to take over jobs on farms and also in factories. This article from 1928 points out that there were guards who used to open and close the doors on subway trains, and people who took tickets before there were turnstiles. And I just love this quote. It says, "Building materials are mixed like dough in a machine and literally poured into place without the touch of a human hand." Automation anxiety surged again in the late 1950s, early 1960s. President Kennedy ranks automation first as job challenge. Computers and automation threatened to create vast unemployment and social unrest. This article from 1958 is about 17,000 longshoremen who were protesting automation on the piers. And if you don't know what longshoremen are, it's because there aren't many of them left. Technology destroyed a lot of those jobs.
Some have blamed trade for some of the problems we've been having here at home in the US. For years, we've been hearing about the loss of high-paying US manufacturing jobs. Many think that manufacturing is declining in the US because companies are moving their operations offshore to markets with lower-cost labor, like China, Mexico, and Vietnam. They also think trade agreements sometimes are unfair, like NAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, because these trade agreements allow companies to re-import those cheaply produced goods back into the US and other countries from where the jobs were taken. So it kind of feels like the exporters win and the importers lose. Now, the reality is output in the manufacturing sector in the US is actually growing, but we are losing jobs. We're losing lots of them. In fact, from 2000 to 2010, 5.7 million manufacturing jobs were lost. But they're not being lost for the reasons you might think. Mike Johnson in Toledo, Ohio, didn't lose his job at the factory to Miguel Sanchez in Monterrey, Mexico. No. Mike lost his job to a machine. 87% of lost manufacturing jobs have been eliminated because we've made improvements in our own productivity through automation. So that means that 1 out of 10 lost manufacturing jobs was due to offshoring.
The Bradley mine in County Durham has operated for almost 200 years, but now the open cast pit that produces 150,000 tonnes of coal a year will close.
I'm devastated. I'm absolutely devastated that it's coming to a close. This will be the last coal mine that I'll probably ever work on. And that will be it.
So what now?
Haven't got a clue.
Men are working 800 metres underground in Britain's last deep coal mine. It looks like a scene from another era, and soon it will be, because Kellingley Colliery in North Yorkshire is closing. Miner Tony Carter says it's not just the 450 jobs here that will be lost, but also part of the country's history.
Father was a miner, and most of the people's, their dads have been miners, so it's in your heritage. So it's just a shame, and gutted really.
My partner's family are in it. They've been in it for 30 years. Obviously coming with late. My father, like I say, worked for British Steel. That industry's gone. It's awful. The thing that there's British lads there that can do the job. We've got all the machinery, got all the training, probably more qualified than a lot of the rest of the world, but we've had it all taken away from us.
So the structural transformation from manufacturing jobs to service was driven by technical change, globalisation, and as you can see from this graph, the UK clearly shifted away from certain sectors, whether it was primary or secondary, and to tertiary. And we've seen deindustrialisation, which will see workers lose their jobs. And of course, we see this via the coal output dramatically falling during the late 80s to the 90s. And obviously, we see imports rising because of that shift away from coal production. Now, again, we can see from the 1970s how manufacturing jobs fell sharply. Now, if they've been working in that industry all of their lives, and some, for example, an older generation, it's easy to recognise the difficulties that they're going to have to find another job. So it'll require either accepting a job with maybe the need of a lower skill set and therefore a lower wage, or perhaps maybe even retraining. Now, the Economic 2030 inquiry released a report on changing jobs, and what I've done is I've just highlighted some key aspects of the report, and I'm just going to go over some graphs as well. So for example, we can see here examples of net gains in industries regarding jobs, showing how structural changes in industries. So again, we can see from manufacturing in 1978 to manufacturing in 2021. And we can see, for example, if we look at professional, scientific and technical activities, how we've just seen that net positive gain. We can also see how declining sector workers can sometimes be slower to move to expanding sectors. And that's going to be a key aim for the government to correct. So I've mentioned already in the last 50 years regarding the shift to service jobs, but it's also noted that younger workers, lower paid workers, are actually mobile. But the issue sometimes is with those lower paid and younger workers, especially the lower paid, that they're often mobile to sectors which are also in decline. However, private sector service industries often see that mobility in terms of their workers with regards to moving to stable or even emerging sectors. And that could be because of, for example, the transferable skills that they've got, which I'll delve into in a minute. Also, young workers are more likely to change occupations, and they're probably more likely to move as well. One reason for that is maybe family commitments. They've not yet got into maybe a stage in their life where they have those family commitments, and therefore it's easier for them to move. Whilst older workers, they might have that commitment. Now, for those who are occupationally immobile, all I mean by that is an artificial barrier from moving between jobs. Now, again, as I mentioned before, to correct that, one of the ways that the government is seeking is to improve transferable skills. Because if you've got key transferable skills which can move from industry to industry and sector to sector, then obviously it's going to be easier for you to find work.
I'm a business minister. I've met countless employers who would tell me that the progress their business could make if they could only hire people with the right skills. I've also met young people and adults whose lives have been transformed because they had the chance to upskill or learn a new trade. That is why I am so focused, obsessed, some people will say, on delivering an ambitious skills agenda to transform the prospects of people up and down our great country. Because higher skills leads to higher productivity, and of course that leads to higher wages, ensuring that we remain globally competitive and creating that economic growth, that dynamic economy needed to pay for our world-class public services. As part of this, we are quadrupling the number of places on skills boot camps, with intensive courses from coding to construction, with recent cut of data showing more than 54% of the 2,210 adults who completed skills boot camps went on to secure a new role or a promotion. Apprenticeships have bounced back to pre-pandemic levels, with over 130,200 apprenticeship starts between August and October of last year. And we are delivering the rollout of T-levels with a plan for up to 100,000 T-level entrants by the end of the spending review period, supported by our £3.8 billion investment in skills over this Parliament.
So some of the examples mentioned was the skills boot camps and the apprenticeships, all aiming to target those of a working age to find themselves back into the workforce quicker. Now, another observation from the OBR was a geographic mismatch, especially between the north and the south. Now, geographic immobility refers to barriers from moving from one area to another. Now, this could be just simply down to the cost of moving. It could be down to, for example, the ability to travel with regards to commuting. But this has definitely been a hot topic since the HS2 Yorkshire route was cancelled, as it was believed that it would have really helped skilled workers in surrounding areas in Yorkshire to travel to key places such as London, and again removing structural issues which may have actually been causing the unemployment.
Northern England is lagging behind the rest of the country when it comes to investment in transport, according to analysis by the think tank IPPR North. It says spending in London is 2.5 times higher per person.
Bigger, better, faster, more. It's not just a vision, but a promise. And in some parts of the country, already being built. With a bigger, better, faster, more. It's not just a vision, but a promise. And in some parts of the country, already being built. With a gigantic kit of gigantic parts. High-speed rail, we've been told many times by the Prime Minister, is the future, transforming travel, essential to levelling up. And so today, as the 160-page integrated rail plan was published, Boris Johnson headed north to give us his headline from it. Bigger and better, only sooner and cheaper.
This is a monumental programme for rail investment, for commuters, for passengers in the East Midlands, West Midlands, the whole of the North.
So transport links will of course help with this, but also the government residential investments such as housing. How they could achieve this? Well, it could be by, for example, building council housing, but it could also be deregulating the housing market and making it quicker to build. The greater the supply, the cheaper of course it will be to move in places which are in close proximity to cities with the jobs that people are looking for.